Those who face eternity easily forget what a lifetime means, what an ending means.
You know it doesn't have to be this way.
No, Kunavang, it does. They need me.
Welcome to End of Dragons Daily 75. I do apologize, the past few days there hasn't been a part, which is probably really bad. It feels like, since the disaster of the end of the Icebrood Saga, there's been a lot of renewed enthusiasm for this series, and thinking about End of Dragons. I think the last 3 parts have had double the viewership than they normally would have gotten, which is great, and then I basically go AFK for a while. I do apologize, I kind of had another, if you guys were following about a month ago, I had a real health scare to do with COVID and my mum. Well, I guess COVID has a lot of long-term effects. She was back in hospital. There was a lot of stress, and in just general, I probably spent too long obsessing over this release, taking on too much criticism too heavily, and probably burned myself out a little bit all at the same time. I just really, for the last couple of days, felt like I needed to get away from it all. I was still playing the game. It was just kind of casual stuff, and in fact, there's about 6 to 7 hours of streams over the past few days, but this series really is what I would rather have been focusing on if everything was going well. Just so that you guys know, I did that Guild Wars 2 lowlights video, and so many of you asked for a Guild Wars 2 highlights video. I do actually have a script ready for that, and I've had ideas for that for a long time now, and so that's definitely on my list. I'm in a weird place right now where, because I kind of just got this new PC, and I racked up so many concepts and things I wanted to do waiting for it to come in, I suddenly have this avalanche of stuff and I need to figure out what I want to do first. Like, I still want to do that Tonics video, and there was something subsequent to it as well, wasn't there? Maybe chairs or something? I want to do the rest of the Introducing series, even though I did a Warrior one and then they immediately reworked Rifle, and it's a lot like when I did Druid for the Elite Specializations and they immediately reworked the Druid Elite skill. I kind of want to figure that out. Maybe I can have a playlist view where I have amendments, if that works. I want to do a video about the new graphics. I want to show you guys the new PC. I want to talk about NVIDIA 3D Vision. I've got FF12 and all the porting of that crazy modded version over to deal with. I've got Daggerfall on my mind. Those are really the big ticket things at the moment. It's just figuring out how I unpack them all and get them out. So anyway, the other thing as well you might have been looking for is an additional Balance with Boots video. We obviously did like a 2-hour pod on that as well. And then the devs did an update saying, okay, based on community feedback, here are the things that we're changing. If someone reminds me in the comments today, I'll put a link in the description so that you guys can check that out if you want. We're not going to produce a video on it because the patch is coming out in a couple of days anyway. And honestly, their changes weren't that exciting to me. Just for kind of a ballpark understanding of this, Boots and I talked for over 2 hours. I think it got cut down to just under 2 hours in the end about this patch, and maybe only like 1 or 2 things were even vaguely, hand-wavily addressed. Not that the entire video we did was complaints and saying, you know, this could be better in this way and that way and so on. But, you know, a lot of the big ticket issues are not really in their amendments. So we'll see what's going on with that. And that's it, really, yeah, over the past couple of days. Today's video, I'm not sure what the footage will be. Probably some Dragonstorm, probably some other stuff that I've just been doing in the background, playing a lot with the Spuds. The guild's activity's really going through the roof at the moment, which is amazing. You might see the Shiver Peaks Pass strike mission back there, which was always crashing me. You've actually never seen that on ultra settings because it was always crashing my other PC. Not this one though, so enjoy that, I suppose. It might be low quality as well because I feel so bad about not having a recent video. I might throw this up at just 720/30 instead of anything better. But hey, it means you get it quicker, as in this morning. So, and maybe before some people on the west coast of America have even gone to bed. So the other thing we're doing is concept art. Let's run through. Today's piece is really weird for me to interpret. I'm not sure what to say that's like tangible about anchoring this to End of Dragons. So if you're out of the loop, they released some concept art with the big news 2 weeks ago, and we're slowly rolling through the End of Dragon concepts. This is number 3. Oh, what can I say? Well, first of all, this reminds me of Heart of Thorns more than anything else. This really feels like that Heart of Thorns style. Something about the light, I think, and the way that these branches come across. This easily could be the New Jungle. What's really unique about this are actually these, well, not spiral structures, circular structures with, like, spokes in the center. They almost look like wheels, don't they? Like bicycle wheels. That in itself makes me think of some of the Utopia concept art and, like, the Wheel of Time and whatever. And obviously that's an observation that we should just hand wave. But I will remind you guys that during the concepting of End of Dragons and this franchise in general recently, they put out the 10-year anniversary art book, which kind of canonized a lot of that Utopia stuff. I don't want to go as far as to say it is completely canon, but at the end of the day, they were talking about and reintroducing a ton of lore that never really existed. It was just work in progress stuff, and acting as though it really is a part of Tyria. You know, like Utopia got its own chapter in that book, alongside places like Alona and Cantha. So, I don't know, if we're moving into an era of Guild Wars 2 after the Dragons, where they start looking at new territories, Utopia might be the first one on the list, and therefore End of Dragons might actually have hints towards that. And then I look at this art with these kind of wheels embedded in the trees. I don't know what else it could really be. I mean, I'm just grasping at straws here. This doesn't really look like Kurzik architecture before. I was tempted to say they're the underside of mushrooms, you know, but they're really not that. Especially those ones you look at slightly in the background a bit. The adventurers for scale are really nice, and I do say adventurers because I think, yeah, we can see the guy with the sword or the girl with the sword on the tree in front of us at the bottom. But if you look slightly in the background to their left, it looks like there's 3 other silhouettes back there. And that really does excite me, just in terms of this concept art gives us a sense of the scale we'll be dealing with. In as much as, you know, POF was really good at heightening the scale. It also introduced mounts at the same time that made those maps feel a lot smaller again. But really, that was just a gameplay experience. In terms of the actual size of some of these places, those epic buildings in Vabi, the enormous constructs around in the Desolation, anywhere really, anywhere in the whole expansion was just massive and gorgeous. And the idea that we'll be completely dwarfed by this gigantic forest is wonderful to me. They already kind of started pulling that off in Heart of Thorns, but it felt very compact in a lot of ways. The only other thing I'm kind of wondering about with these wheels is maybe we, like, climb on them or something. You know, if they're going to do, like, a climbing mastery where you can climb on the walls in Kaineng, maybe then it's applicable to certain, you know, textures and wall types in the forest, and this is one of them. I don't know. I mean, maybe they're just buildings, and I'm not supposed to be looking any deeper, and it's kind of a more vague sort of art house kind of concept art piece. So there you go. Let me know what you guys think about that, and the next piece will be on the upcoming part. For anyone trying to preempt with comments, it's the very red-hewn one. And in fact, the next 2 concepts that we'll be dealing with, the next 3 we'll be dealing with, I don't actually think it appeared on ArenaNet's official media. You had to go outside to other websites that have shown us these, so that will be on the next part. Let's roll in on the comments. Oh, well, hold on. I'll show this to you guys. Here, check this out. I tweeted this just the other day. I've been doing one of the reward tracks in World vs. World for POF. They give you an initial reward track that you can't repeat, but it actually gives you a ton of money because it gives you loads of, like, Path of Fire junk items. And in POF, the junk items all have this amazing flavor text. So if you see this on screen, here we have some false bottom crates, and it says, keeping the right palms greased and occasional sacrifices to the Mordant Crescent ensure a healthy black market between Amnoon and the Kingdom. I loved all these little bits of flavor text. Someone, or a team of people, clearly put a lot of effort in on POF to adding this stuff. This was one of the ways, you know, we often talk about the elite specialization NPCs that ground those elite specs into the world. This was one of the other ways in which that expansion did so well to flesh out its setting. We've been talking a lot in Ender Dragons Daily recently about how limited, especially in Living World, this game is to really flesh out the subject material it's dealing with. POF was probably the best we've ever seen Guild Wars 2 get, and precisely because of some of this flavor text. And there's so much of it. I could have taken a million screenshots. I kind of wanted to do a whole, like, album and link people to it. So, yeah, I spent a good amount of time earlier in the week really inspired about this, and I hope desperately that End of Dragons goes further with this. So there you go, a little special. That's just in my screenshot folder here. Look, this is me putting my own comment in for the show this time. Right, we got Lex Noodle here, who says, wow, this one's a bit self-indulgent as well, by the way. The idea about pulling characters out of the personal story back during Season 1 is such a spark of genius. Like, instead of introducing Casimir and Marjorie, pull Demi Beetlestone out and get her to join, and bam, you immediately have such a rich character history to rely on, and so many hooks into big development arcs. They could have pulled Jarvi out way back then. You sure have heard about her anytime you were in Holbrook, from the Vigil Recruit, or even in the vanilla days. Let me just say, the Jarvi thing, Jarvi is exactly this. Jarvi wasn't just referenced in Holbrook, Jarvi was there at the Vigil. Jarvi is an example of the devs doing exactly what we're talking about here. The only the unfortunate downside is Jarvi didn't really get much time to do anything in the Icebrood Saga, I would say. I mean, there's been a little bit of emphasis on her. But yeah, especially doing it back in the Season 1 days is where I like this idea most. Because you got to remember, during Season 1, it was coming right out of the personal story, which had killed a ton of characters. So you had a real problem in the personal story where people were being hot swapped. Fall in love with Tybalt or Siren or Forgor as a character? Well, they're dead now, and you've got to deal with Traherne. Fall in love with Kekt of the Dermot Priory, for example. Maybe you played a certain way where Kekt appears all the time. Well, he's dead now, so you've got to fall in love with someone else. Continuing with the survivors would have solved this problem to a certain extent, actually fixed issues with the story. They did have, if you guys think back to the personal story, and again, I hate to plug my own stuff, but if you watch my Let's Play, go to like the last part, or the penultimate part, where I'm doing the Source of Ore. They have a moment, I'm not talking about the Zaitan dungeon, but right before you go to fight the Eye of Zaitan and, you know, free Razor and cleanse that area, the ley lines there, or whatever, as they would retroactively explain them as, you've got a moment where everyone's standing in a chamber and it's all the survivors. And there's a ton of survivors. There's a ton of characters that do make it, and we do have connections to. I think the comment here is going to go into them a little bit more. They could have pulled Mira, the Lion Guard deputy from Claw Island. Mira's a brilliant idea, this comment has got. Mira, like, goes through a ton. She, like, gets her face completely scarred and battered in. She's kind of like a Cormyr of this game. And a lot of you guys are going to say, oh, Cormyr was a terrible character. Cormyr is actually a brilliant character that goes through a ton of suffering and comes out the other side a badass. And Mira is the same. Mira goes through so much, and she's there at the end, and what did they ever do with her following that? I've lost my place here a little bit. How they could have used Mira. Mira even appears in your personal story instance after the mission, scarred and recovering in the end of the personal story. Again, feels like an interesting, super important character. What about Karis? Another character possibly present almost through the whole personal story. Super motivated now with the heroic sacrifice of her BFF/mentor Tegwin. She'd be sure to join up a guild about going after the dragons. What about Gore, who is literally the expert in dragon magic in the personal story and does all the necessary technobabble and mumbo jumbo? There's no need for timey when you already have a prominent expert and key character from the beginning to the end of the personal story. It would have been so easy to just expand Destiny's Edge and recruit all these new members, letting some sub in for others when the VAs weren't available. And like, imagine how integrated it all would have been. And even if Season 1 wasn't replayable, here's the kicker, guys. Here's why I really love this comment. Even if Season 1 wasn't replayable, those are still the same characters. You know them from the personal story. Getting caught up with some extra dialogue at the start of Season 2 would be no problem. So much wasted potential. Which is a brilliant point. The thing is, what you got to remember with the Season 1 thing is they never planned for it to be this way. I mean, they planned for it to become unavailable. They planned to arrest you and force you to sit in the chair and keep Guild Wars 2 installed and logging in to enjoy their story. They did go for that, and that was a ballsy, crazy move, right? Which many of us may abhor nowadays. But the idea that they would then return to conventional storytelling afterwards, you know, that was not on the docket. It was just, this really illuminates how crazy that Season 1 idea is. That they're simultaneously going to try and tell this big epic story with all these moving parts and plot twists and things that people need to hold in mind. And they were going to deliver that through a content stream that's getting removed. Like, that's an insane thing to sit at a meeting, to look your boss in the eye or whatever, and to go for that, to sign off on that. I mean, it almost feels flippant, right? And to a certain degree, I feel like it was a little bit flippant. They clearly hadn't really conceived these ambitions in full right around launch, because they were still talking about conventional expansions right around launch. So it happened somewhere in those 6 months window. Anyway, I mean, how much time do you really need to figure this stuff out? And they were emboldened from release. I don't want to rant about the whole Season 1 decision again here. The other thing I would say is maybe there would still have been VA issues. I mean, how much of this is just that the Season 1 team wanted to create their own characters, and they didn't really understand the existing state of the world, versus, okay, they had Gore, fine, but Gore, the guy that did all the Asura voices and Gore, he's not really available, just as much as several key members of Destiny's Edge aren't really available. I also get a sense, by the way, that when they invented Destiny's Edge 2.0, they didn't really want to turn their backs on actual Destiny's Edge full on. It's just they wanted to save them for the franchise's biggest moments, that being the death of Elder Dragons. And yeah, it wouldn't be in expansions, but they'd be in those big moments. And they weren't always on screen to kind of preserve them. I think they wanted like a major party and a minor party. But by the time they got to Heart of Thorns, so much had changed and been wrestled and swapped around. They still kind of went for it, right? If you look at the Heart of Thorns promotional material, a lot of it still focuses on classic Destiny's Edge, not the new guys. I mean, there was kind of one trailer for each, I would say. And then when you get in game, there is a lot of focus about them, but it's a rescue mission, so they're off on the side. Yeah, it's just a bit of a mess. The other thing I would say as well is for villains. They could have been pulling stuff from the personal story for villains to make this game and this world feel a little bit more interconnected. If you're going to go with Ellen Keel, not Deputy Mira, maybe Mira should be in the Mai Trin position, you know? Maybe Mira should be the antagonist. Mira you know, suffering, went off and founded the Aether Blades and so on. They didn't even do that either. Scarlet, for example, maybe could have been pulled from the personal story. I mean, you are a little bit more limited there because so much of the story, the core story, is about unification and people coming together. But, I mean, look at Fowlane. Fowlane maybe even could have been in that role, and then that would have helped so much, enormously, with the conclusion of her story and fleshing a lot of that out for the Heart of Thorns arc. But a lot of the bigger, more interesting characters were already kind of killed off on the enemy side, I would say. You know, Geheron's not around anymore. Cadian had that amazing story pre-release, and then is just a random filler boss in the Twilight Arbor. Almost made my lowlights list, by the way. You know, he's dead, so you can't use him. But it's still a rich world, I think. It was possible. But it feels like the devs just weren't interested. They didn't want to look and see what strings they could pull out there. And I think this is one of the fundamental differences in this game's storytelling compared to a lot of others. Chili says, I think they should dedicate a small team to making smaller stories of the more local stuff, like the Fire Legion and or stuff similar. Well, see, I kind of take issue with this comment. Your impulse is right? Because what you're trying to do is flesh out the world, give them more time to deal with the aftermath of big events and so on, which is essential. I don't think it fits in Guild Wars, though. If you look at the current events team and what current events were doing, that's basically exactly what was going on, except often the current events team were dealing with new subject material. Like, they did the whole Shadowstone thing and the anomalies and a time-traveling Char, rather than, you know, fallout from events. But sometimes there was a bit of overlap, like the Awakened Portals and whatever. It's just that then in those situations, they were more dynamic event-focused and action-focused and gameplay-oriented, rather than lots of little conversations with NPCs and little quests based in achievements to do. So maybe they just never hit their stride. Maybe this is workable, but there's a side of me that just feels like the Guild Wars community isn't conditioned to care about updates like this enough. So therefore, they have to do stuff like reality rifts, you know, really gameplay-heavy stuff that doesn't really do the job of fleshing out the world, because they don't really have a great way to deliver that would be meaningful for a lot of players running through it. So, I don't know. I think there are reasons the current event team aren't doing stuff, and it's because it didn't quite gel in the ecosystem, the infrastructure, the way that Guild Wars is built now. I don't think it's as easy as just saying, let's add little stories in. A lot of players wouldn't know about them, and they wouldn't play them. It's hard to tell because you follow my channel and we're always dealing with the news and thinking about this stuff, but you got to think about the bar is a lot lower and the understanding of what's in the game is a lot lower for most average players. And systems and concepts like this do need to get them too. Just pandering to those who are already fanatical hasn't really been helping Guild Wars 2, I would say, over the past, 8 years. The SAS Wagon has a cool twist on this amazing story idea we had that it's all a fake out and Jormag's frozen us. They say, I can imagine if the ice cube theory were true, an instance down the line when Marjorie asks what our plans are now with no imminent threat from the dragons. What's the future of Dragon's Watch? We tell her we're thinking about taking some time off, maybe taking a break, getting some rest. Quiet whispers of Jormag's voice rise behind the lines in the scene, telling us to give up, rest, sleep. They can manage without us, just like in the first patch of the Icebrood saga. I'm not sure it's not what's happening, but I'd be glad to be wrong. I like the creepier themes, and I'd like to see more. This is beautiful. What I've really been struck by playing some of those early Icebrood saga instances, that's another thing I've got to keep going with, and that's the story playthrough. I was doing like an immersive playthrough for you guys, and now this finale's come and just completely pushed that out of my mind. I've only just remembered that I had that going on. The one thing that really struck me when I was back in Grothmar, because I've actually shot that episode, I shot that even on the old PC, it's just not edited and put up for you guys, is just how different those early releases feel. They're a lot darker, they're a lot creepier, they're a lot more mature. There are so many great things about the Icebrood saga. While I disagree that the overall decision to do the Char Civil War was smart, the way they did it and the way they handled a lot of that material in there was great, It really was. There's so much good about the Icebrood saga that turned Guild Wars 2 storytelling into what I wanted in terms of its tone, and you can really see it oozing out. All that stuff with the whispers was so cool, and yeah, now it just feels weird. It really does. You go back, you look at after all of Champions is done, it's like, wow, this is just strange now. This doesn't feel like the same story. But if they ended with the Ice Cube theory and then the whispers were there, it would be great. This would be quite the rug pull, let me say. Samar Kuzak says, is referencing me when about 11 minutes into the previous video, I was questioning why the hell they did the marionette fight, which we know is coming up and fairly soon. And they pushed the finale earlier, and then they're doing the marionette fight. And he says, I knew this was going to happen. And he's quoting me, we want Living World Season 1 story. We want the marionette boss fight. Okay, here you go. The marionette fight sucks. Why add this? Why not make new content? Well, okay, look, it's very easy to overgeneralize like this. And I would warn you on the internet, especially the way people talk about Reddit. I have no problems with Reddit because Reddit is not a person. Reddit is not a unified community. Reddit is a lot of different people with disparate opinions. I've described before how even among this one player base, the variance in opinions has just gone up and up and up and up and up about Guild Wars 2. There's very little unity and cohesion in this community. Reddit just sometimes will be on a train about one thing and sometimes on a train about another thing. But in general, when you see people upvoting a problem and then upvoting the reverse of the problem, it's not the same guy that doesn't know how to make up his mind. It's different people because it's not a unified community. Now, if you're looking at, so I warn you about that, will save you a lot of stress on the internet. Now, if you're talking about me specifically, I'll say I haven't been asking for the marionette fight. I like the marionette fight, but it's not a huge fight. I've been asking for Living World Season 1 to be implemented in the story journal so that the story is complete. A random little addition of a boss fight that they can put in because they're efficient about resources is, yes, I think smart, but not at the top of my list, and you haven't seen me asking for the marionette fight. And what I'd say further is in the context of the worst, most crunch story beat they have ever done. Now, there's been worse decisions by the studio, but in terms of actually, like, the way they have handled the lore, one of the biggest moments, I mean, the death of 2 Elder Dragons at once is the biggest moment of this story. And to crunch and rush it out so that you can then have a marionette release a little bit later, that is what I'm referring to. Don't do the marionette. Don't push this release out earlier. All hands on deck for this release. Put it out in July if you have to. Pay for the work. This is what your franchise is about. It's not about the marionette, and it's not about as many incremental little updates you can get in so the gem store coffers can keep flowing, which is the truth behind what's actually going on here. So yeah, I do take issue with the marionette. I stand by it. There's no hypocrisy here. Next, and finally, we have Ben Smith, who says, put some screenshots on Discord, but to confirm, the end of the Dragonstorm, at the end of the Dragonstorm, the magic dispersing into the air does indeed float towards the south and away from the ley lines present in the fight. The story journal also mentions the magic in the air that we thought Aurene would be able to consume. It also specifically mentions how it didn't hit the Eye of the North, so more nods towards the magic heading south. It also might be about the Eye of the North being a special location. Yeah, I don't know whether they'll ever really dive into that now. You know, we got a little bit with the scrying pool, who built it, and what's really special about it, I don't know whether they'll do. But yeah, the fact that in the story journal they even talk about the magic leading away, I think is a big tell. And yeah, I've actually been in there and seen it for myself now. Now, the one thing I would disagree, I don't really think it looks like bubbles. I mean, as far as Guild Wars 2 is concerned, they do have bubbles. You know, there's like the bubble glider and stuff like that. You would have thought that they would actually use those assets and if they wanted it to be bubbles. It's kind of like blue dots, all right? And yeah, maybe the idea that it's supposed to look a bit watery and a bit like a stream and it's more nods to the Deep Sea Dragon. Maybe they're doing that in the art. I just think calling them bubbles is a bit of a stretch, but they are definitely flowing away and directly south. They actually fly right overhead where you are in that staging area where they take control of the camera. As other people have mentioned, if you're doing the actual story and you go in to have the Ryland fight afterwards, you'll see that it's all flowing right there in front of you as well. And it is fun to see. I recommend you guys. Also, you should just do your Dragonstorm daily. As much as the content isn't that interesting or whatever, you do get 2 gold from it. You do get a chance for that Ascended Greatsword. And apparently you get a chance for all of those Kraukatoric Scion weapons as well from the end of the previous season. They can drop from it as well. And it's not very long. You know, it's really easy to get at least 4 gold a day in Guild Wars 2 at the moment. Just regular daily and a quick Dragonstorm. Not to mention all the money you can get from Mystic Coins. You know, they've announced Gen 3 legendaries. There's a lot of reason to have money. There's a lot of reason to play at the moment. I think doing Dragonstorm once a day is a good one. So there you have it, guys. That's End of Dragons Daily. Give me any comments and thoughts you have down below. And I'll get back to regularity here. I'm going to actually write out all these things I want to do and find a good order I want to release them in. And thanks for bearing with me over the past couple of days. Cheers, everyone. Take care now. Oh, and if you're desperate for more, don't forget there are those big, long stream VODs. I'll see you next time. It's all PvP, which might be boring to you guys. I'll see you next time.